Hello once again, everyone, and welcome back to the Math Puzzle Crash Course. This is part two of a discussion of this problem. I put a video out, I guess about 9 or 10 days ago that went through this problem, and I went through and explained how the strict interpretation of PEMDAS and BODMAS gives you a certain answer. If you haven't seen that video yet, you might want to go back and watch it, or if you'd like to, you can just pause the video now, try to work it out, and we'll come back and discuss it. I'm going to go into a lot more detail in this video than I did previously. First of all, I'm going to say the comments I had on the last video um, were kind of all over the place. The strict definition of PEMDAS and BODMAS, you're solving multiplication and division left to right. There's um, um, no consideration for implicit multiplication having precedence. And I had one person come back and say that it's 5, always deal with brackets first. So 4 times 2 plus 3 is 4 times 5. Well, yeah, that is true, but you got to remember there's 100 divided by 4 in the problem. So somebody could just as easily look at the coefficient outside of the parentheses as the 100 divided by 4. But we're going to get into that more as we go through that. We'll discuss all that, and I'm even going to get into the ambiguity of the problem itself. Um, Again, someone says 4 times 2 plus 3 if using the distribution probably the answer would be 5, not 25. Well, you could also use the distributive property and say the 100 divided by 4 is A, and B, the B constant could be the 2 plus 3 in parentheses, and I'm going to go through that as well. So you can use the distributive property and still make a case for 125. um, and I had someone else who said, well, the P in PEMDAS means that you have to solve everything that's in parentheses within the parentheses and outside of the parentheses first, and then implicit multiplication is part of the P of PEMDAS. Well, if that's the case, the P comes before E for the exponent, so are you then telling me that implicit multiplication has priority over exponents as well? That doesn't quite make sense if you look at the formula for the area of a circle. That's definitely, you have some implicit multiplication with the pi r squared, but the r squared is solved first because exponents obviously have priority over the implied multiplication here. So didn't quite understand that comment. Again, if you're looking at the order of operations and you're looking at the various acronyms that are out there, they're all different depending on what English speaking country you might be from. You have PEMDAS, BODMAS, BIDMAS, BEDMAS. They all mean the same thing. They all give the same answer. Um, and the thing is, none of these really take into consideration implicit multiplication as far as having precedence. You know, basically with PEMDAS, you would start out with parentheses, then followed by exponents. Then you have multiplication and division that you just solved left to right. So whichever one you run into first, in this case, you have division first, 100 divided by 4 before you're multiplying the 4 times everything in the parentheses. So given the strict, and I'll say it again, the strict definition of PEMDAS, your multiplication and division is just solved left to right. Then step 4 would be your addition and subtraction. And the P in the parentheses here is referring to what's inside. We'll get to that in a little bit more detail. So following PEMDAS, again, parentheses, it's what's inside of the parentheses. So it's 2 plus 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. And then you do your division multiplication left to right. 100 divided by 4 is 25. 25 times 5 would give you 125, just like I'm showing here. The division would come first, then multiplication. Now, I know a lot of people have been taught, and there are scientific journals, there's a lot of literature that does give priority to implicit multiplication over explicit multiplication and division. But if you're going by the strict definition of PEMDAS or BODMAS, your division would be solved first going left to right. Again, 25 times 5 is 125 after the multiplication. All right, so the case for 5. So, because a lot of people have been arguing that, well, you could also come up with 5. And that's really why a lot of these problems, like the 8 divided by 2 times the quantity, 1 plus 2 in parentheses, and so on, there's a number of these problems that all have division first, followed by implicit multiplication. And they're all viral, and people argue over these problems constantly on the internet. So the case for 5, number one, you've got the priority, or it's called implicit multiplication. There's no actual multiplication symbol. So the assumption is when the multiplication is implied, that number outside of the parentheses goes with what's inside of it, and it's given a higher priority than your explicit division and multiplication. So that's how people are coming up with 5 that way. And there is. You can Google multiplication by juxtaposition and look that up, and you will find in a lot of scientific journals, a lot of mathematical texts that is a thing. Now I know that in North America, a lot of the education systems are not prioritizing implicit multiplication, and they're teaching a more strict version of PEMDAS, where they don't care if it's implied or implicit or explicit. It's just your multiplication and division is solved left to right. Again, the second way you could try to come up with 5 would be if what's your interpretation of the obulus? Well, the obulus is the division symbol. We'll get into that too a little bit more as we go through. So hold off on the comments until you at least see what I'm presenting here. Um, a lot of people who commented on this, and there's been 4 to 5,000 views and I don't know, maybe 50, 60 comments so far as of September 11th, 2024. But there's been a number of people who think that PEMDAS is a 6-step checklist. It is not. Multiplication does not take priority over division. A lot of people are coming up with 5, not because of the implicit multiplication, not because of how they interpret the obulus, the division symbol, but because they actually believe that PEMDAS means that everything is done in that order. The M's before the D, the A is before the S. I've actually seen people try to tell me that addition is done before subtraction. And they'll get a wrong number because of the way they try to do that. Multiplication does not take priority over division, and I'm talking about explicit multiplication and explicit division. Okay, so implicit multiplication. So again, if you have 5 times 3, which is, you have your multiplication symbol, 5 times 3, or 5 times 3 can be represented this way. This is considered implicit multiplication, this multiplication on the right. It's the same thing. Now, again, I said it initially, according to the strict rules of PEMDAS, BODMAS, BEDMAS, and BIDMAS, multiplication and division are solved in order from left to right, and there's no distinction made between implicit and explicit multiplication. And again, there's this other viral problem out there, 6 divided by 2 times the quantity 1 plus 2. A very viral problem that shows up on the internet. Using the strict rules of PEMDAS and BODMAS, you solve inside of the parentheses first. And that would be 1 plus 2 is 3. Then next would be your division going from left to right. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Then your multiplication is next. We're going left to right. Division is done first here, then multiplication. Then you have 3 times 3 is 9. That's following the strict rules. Now, if you're using multiplication by juxtaposition and you're giving priority, then you would have solve inside the parentheses first. That's the same as before. 1 plus 2 is 3. But now implicit multiplication is solved before your explicit multiplication or your division in this case. So you would actually have 2 times 3 is 6. Then your division would be less. 6 divided by 6 equals 1. Now, I'll say many people who have worked in various sciences have seen poorly written expressions like this. You have 1 divided by 2x, where you're using a forward slash as the division symbol instead of a horizontal line. And this has generally been interpreted to mean that 1 divided by 2x as this, with the 2x in the denominator. Now, it's possible, as you're looking at that, how do you interpret that? I could see someone interpreting this here as 1 divided by 2 times x, where the x is actually would be like in the numerator. So writing it as 1/2 x with this forward slash, you could cause a lot of confusion because some people could very easily interpret this as 1/2 x or x over 2. Very easily to make that confusion. So division really should be written clearly. And I will say the obulus has been interpreted differently over time. If you remember earlier, I said there's a couple cases that you could try to make for why the answer would be 5, and one of those is, your implicit multiplication. Um, and your second one could be the interpretation of the obulus. Now, as far as I know, modern interpretations of the obulus, basically, the number directly to the left is in a numerator, the number directly to the right is in the denominator. But back in 1659, I think, was he Swedish? Swiss? I'm trying to remember. The mathematician Johann Rahn in 1659 had the book Pre-Algebra, where the obulus first appeared. And back then in the book, the obulus was interpreted as everything to the left was in a numerator and everything to the right in a denominator. So not only could you be thinking of this in terms of implicit multiplication, but depending how you would interpret the obulus, yeah, that changes things. Now, again, I said in modern times the obulus typically means that the number to the immediate left is in the numerator, and the number immediately to the right is in the denominator. So if you had a problem like this, 5 plus 10 divided by 2 plus 12, well, you would say, well, you see, you would do division first, 10 divided by 2. Well, that equals 5. So 5 plus 5 plus 12 is 22. But if you interpreted it differently, the old way, you would actually have 5 plus 10 in a numerator divided by 2 plus 12, all in a denominator. So you'd get a different answer based on that. Now, I will say scientific calculators do not always agree as well when it comes to implicit multiplication. And here's a pretty famous image off of Quora where someone used a Casio scientific calculator, the FX570MS, and it solved this viral problem, 6 divided by 2. You can see the problem here, 6 divided by 2 times the quantity 1 plus 2 in parentheses. They got a 1. Now the other calculator was an FX50FH. They got a 9 on that calculator. And the reason for that is that some scientific calculators take into account implicit multiplication, others do not. Now, I'm not even going to get into like your basic Dollar Tree calculator or even the Windows PC, your standard mode calculator that works in the immediate execution mode. So good luck. When you multiple operations, you're going to get the wrong answer, and I see that happen a lot of the time. Um, Again, conventions really don't even need to be in agreement. There's a case to be made for the answers of 125 or 5 for this problem. 100 divided by 4 times the quantity 2 plus 3. The distributive property is often used to make a case for or against implicit multiplication having priority. The distributive property, remember, it pairs 3 different operations. You have multiplication, addition, and subtraction. And these pairs are paired this way. You've got, one, you pair multiplication with addition, or you could pair multiplication and subtraction. So with that, you've got, A times the quantity B plus C is the same thing as AB plus AC. Or with subtraction, multiplication and subtraction, A times the quantity B minus C is the same as AB minus AC. So this is often used in both sides of the argument. Now, I will say, if you're looking at the obulus in the modern way it's interpreted, the number immediately to the left is in a numerator, the number immediately to the right in a denominator. You could rewrite this as 100 fourths times the quantity 2 plus 3, right? So in that case, I could say A is 100 fourths, B is 2 plus 3 in parentheses, and going through all that, I've got, it's equal to 100 fourths times 2 plus 100 fourths times 3 using the distributive property. I'd get 125 if I did that. Um, and the problem is that the people that are supporting 5 will just say that A is equal to 4 and B is equal to 2 plus 3 because they're not looking at the 100 divided by out to the left. They're trying to isolate that implied multiplication. So it really just comes down to whether you think implicit multiplication has precedence or not. And that really is really what it comes down to. I mean, if you run through the distributive property with A is 4 and B is 2 plus 3 in parentheses, you're going to get the answer of 5 going through the distributive property. So they're really doing nothing more than still giving precedence to the implicit multiplication over the division. I don't really need to say there's not really implicit division. I don't know why I wrote explicit division. There's not. I've never seen any implied division. Um, I'll throw this out here too. The Casio FX 991W calculator manual. This is right off of the Casio website. And again, I've said it before, some scientific calculators will take into account implicit multiplication. And look at it right here. It goes through the order of operations. Number 1, coordinate transformations. Number 2, type A functions is what they call it, which would be exponents, right? Things like exponents. Then they've got powers and roots. They're really breaking this down a lot more and a lot more granular than just PEMDAS, I guess. But when you get down here to step 7, you have abbreviated multiplication in front of type B functions, things like 2 times the square root of 3 or a log 2, etc. Permutations and combinations. And then you have things like your explicit multiplication and division. So with this calculator, they're actually giving precedence to applied multiplication. I actually skipped over this step up here, step 5, abbreviated multiplication format in front of pi, memory name or variable name, things like 2 pi or 5 times a or pi a, etc. So they are giving precedence to implied multiplication over explicit multiplication and division. Not all calculators do it. Now we showed the FX 570MS, which I believe was a calculator that we had in that picture where the one viral problem they got the answer of 1 instead of 9. And again here, if you look at the calculation priority sequence in the manual for that calculator, the step 5 here is implied multiplication of pi or natural logarithm base, memory name or variable name, 2 pi, 3e, 5a, pi a, etc. The 7th step is implied multiplication of type B functions, again, 2 times the square root of 3, a log 2, etc. And then you down here in step 10, It's multiplication and division with a multiplication symbol and division symbol. So again, they're prioritizing implicit multiplication over straight uh, multiplication and division. So it just depends. Again, here's the FX570MS. They are giving precedence to the implicit multiplication. With the FX50FH, they do not. And it goes along with the interpretations of PEMDAS and BODMAS. When you get into implicit multiplication, you could make the claim that the problem 100 divided by 4 times the problem that in this problem is also ambiguous. Now you can look at Wolfram Alpha. Go online and type in. I tried to type in a division symbol, but I had to type it in 100 divided by 4 times the quantity 2 plus 3, and it takes it and draws it out this way, and it tells me the answer is 125. It's not trying to prioritize the implied multiplication here at all. Um, Now, again, I mentioned before, a lot of people try to argue based on a misunderstanding of PEMDAS. They'll say that multiplication is not solved before division. Multiplication is not. Multiplication is not solved before division. PEMDAS, again, is not a six-step checklist. So people that are doing that are incorrect. Now, if you're somebody that you were taught that implicit multiplication always has precedence, then I'd say good for you. But I need people to understand that the strict interpretation of PEMDAS does not really include that. So there's conflict between conventions on that. Again, PEMDAS, the M and the D are on the same level. The addition and subtraction are on the same level. And again, here's a graphic of the order of operations. Now, typically your PEMDAS, BODMAS, there's GEMA or GEMMA, I don't know how you actually pronounce that, but the G, I believe there's just grouping symbols. E is exponents. M, they just have the letter M because really multiplication and division are really the same thing. Division is multiplying by a reciprocal. So again, with PEMDAS and BODMAS and GEMA, you're going to get the same answer. But notice that the strict interpretation of that, it says simplify inside of parentheses and brackets. It says this priority does not apply to numbers outside the grouping symbols. So that does not apply here. Now, where it could apply here would be if you're giving precedence to implicit multiplication, then you would actually have to insert a step in between 2 and 3 to do that. And again, they got some examples here on that. But really, that's kind of what I wanted to show because I've seen a lot of different arguments on this, and some people are saying the answer is only 5 or the answer is only 125. But you'll find plenty of videos on the internet by PhD mathematicians even who are going to tell you that hey these things are really if you're going to write out a problem like this, let's write it out a lot clearer than what's been done here. When you get back to the very beginning of this problem, you got 100 divided by 4. Well, why not just come in here and put a let's see, let me change the pointer. Why not put a symbol in here? Put a multiplication symbol in here. Draw one in. That's a really poor one, but you know what I'm saying. Make it explicit, and then there's no controversy. There's no implied multiplication. So 100, if I would write this out differently and you had explicit multiplication here and it was 4 with the multiplication symbol and then the 2 plus 3, there would be no controversy and the answer would be 125. It would clearly be 125. And I know there's still people out there who are going to keep insisting that M is before D because of how PEMDAS is arranged. And that's false. I'll just keep saying that's false. But again, that's really all I wanted to do. I wanted to go through that again and explain that. So hopefully this has made some sense. Hopefully it's shed a little bit of light on this. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the next video.